Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of how or to what extent do Western governments that are absolutely wedded to mass migration, and mass migration of third world peasants, by the way, often with an IQ of around 70, they want this mass migration, but what effort do they go to prepare these people for life in the West? So they're coming from an impoverished, dirt poor, shithole third world country where there are all the social and religious structures, Islamic, for example, religious structures around them, tribal structures, all sorts of social structures, and they're moving them from there to the West where none of these social structures exist, or if they do exist, not in the same ways they did in the countries of their origin. So they go from a region of intense social structure to an area of little, if no, social structure. What do they do? How do they behave? Now, who's at fault for this is you can debate that, but the issue here is the Western governments appear to be making no effort to prepare these people, these mass migrants, be they illegal or otherwise, no attempt to prepare these people for life in the West. Now, you'd think just in the interests of social harmony, in the interests of just smooth relationships, creating untroubled situations, that they would arrange for these people to all undergo, pretty in their own language if need be, pretty intensive training courses, acclimatization courses, instruction, guidance. I mean, call it what you like, but at least to prepare them. But it seems these things are optional. And, if you look at, say, these refugee camps, people all want to go to, America, for example, or Australia or something like that. They say, okay, well, for those of you that have ticked the box, you want to go to Australia, we've got free language courses and movies about Australia and all this sort of thing, and there's going to be interpreters for you and so all that and the people I know who worked in these alleged refugee camps, or they claim that nobody bothers turning up. You might get the odd one or two, but they fidget around for 5 minutes and they get up and leave. So all these free English language courses, and nobody comes along. They don't compel them to do it. They're not told, well, hey, listen, unless you're competent in English, you ain't going nowhere, buddy. You're not going to Australia or an English-speaking country. But instead of that, they don't bother. So these people can arrive. They can be years in refugee camps, and they arrive and they hang out with all their Islamic buddies from Pakistan or India or somewhere, and they arrive not speaking a word of English. And not having any awareness of really what life's like in a first world country. Their only interest is, I want to get there and get the free stuff. And beyond that, they really don't have any game plan. Now, sure, they're coached and schooled by globalist agitators to say, well, I'm a refugee, and if I go back there, they're going to kill me and do this and do that. I mean, they're told, they're given all those lines, which are all nonsense, of course. Nonetheless, so what we see in England and elsewhere is they put up all these illegals or refugee claimants, call it what you like. They put them up in areas, say, that are right next to a high school or a girls' high school or a primary school or a community centre that's used for young children's events like music or, I don't know, dancing or whatever. So they put these there can be hundreds of young men there who don't speak any English, and appear to have no idea how to behave. They appear to have no sort of cognizance of how they should behave, what they should say. They don't know that it's inappropriate to hang outside a girls' high school, asking for sexual favors from the students. And yet there is no attempt by the authorities. Okay, look, you guys keep away from that high school. If you go there, you'll be deported. Some sort of penalty to be paid. That's not how you behave here. That's not what you do. And if you want to be part of the society, you don't do that sort of thing. But there doesn't appear to be that. Doesn't appear to be. If there is any effort, then it's something that these people are just too low IQ to pick up on, perhaps, or maybe they don't take it seriously. Now, this comes to the next stage of, I was in an Islamic country once that was going through quite a bit of unrest, social unrest, and there was some sort of gathering that was looking rather riotous, and it wasn't far from the hotel I was in, which was a Western 5-star hotel. And so I sort of watched with interest. I could see the thing. I thought, where's this going to go? So I didn't. I approached it, but kept a distance because some years ago this was. So I could sprint back at high speed to the hotel if it came to it. But I wanted to watch what happened. And there was this again. It was a mob, and it was looking rather riotous. And then a holy man or an imam, some religious dude, appeared from wherever, and he started talking to the crowd, and it began to disperse. Nobody was willing to defy this imam, this Islamic religious guy. When he said do this, do that, that was it. It was no one back chatted him, or if there was any mumblings and murmurings, and it was done sort of under the breath. But no one's willing to defy this holy man. Now, I don't think a policeman or a politician or someone like that could have done that, but the holy man could. Such was the deference and respect within that society and the structure of maybe he was particularly noteworthy for his his great wisdom and forbearance or something. This holy guy, the equivalent, in a priest, I guess, in Islamic terms, and so the crowd dispersed, and here's this one guy, and no one's going to defy him, and it was obvious that he was seen as his person was almost sacred. You got the impression. So I thought, that's interesting. Whereas if a police officer appears to these people in the or anyone appears to these people, that third world people are coming to the West, there's fuck you. Now, if you just looking at talking to people who have, say, their community liaison officers for, say, people, the Pacific Islanders that come to Australia, and there are certain family structures and structures of if you misbehave, you're shamed by you've shamed your family and your tribe, you've shamed your village, and there are many sort of social pressures can be brought to bear to make people behave or prevent them from misbehaving, and those structures of social control are lost once they come to the West. But they have no respect for the Western way. Everything's done through family and structure and village and this and that. But those structures don't exist in the West. We've got independent courts of law and supposedly apolitical police force, but that's well out the window now. All across the Western world, the police forces are now globalist end forces, which is a terrible tragedy, the politicization of the judiciary, the police force, and so on. But in the West, all the sources, or primarily the sources of authority, such as independent courts, elected parliaments, these sources of authority are all independent of the village level social structure, and you can still have local governments and things like that. But this idea that the absolutely impartial codified law, which is how it once was in the West, is where the authority comes from. That's something that these people cannot even conceive. At a conception level, they can't get it. At a practical level in the street, it's so that when a police officer comes and will do this, do that, you don't have authority. You're not a village elder. You're not an imam. You're not a source of authority in my cognition. I therefore can ignore you. And that's what these people are like. They're not taught and they're not trained or acclimatized to the West, so they think, well, I'll hang around a girls' high school if I want to, and you have no authority to tell me otherwise. And so the respect for authority and the types of authority, independent, impartial authority that in the West we use, again, the elected parliament, the apolitical police force, and independent courts and so on, which is how it once was, but is no longer. That isn't and cannot ever be a source of authority that they respect or appreciate. So they will only ever perceive that if they got caught doing something, they were just unlucky getting caught. They haven't done anything wrong, which, by the way, was the behaviour of the Arab kids and Middle Eastern kids and so on that were in a high school I went to briefly. They never thought, no matter what they did, they never thought it was wrong. That they could steal anything that wasn't nailed down, but that wasn't wrong, because they had this concept of like communal ownership and everything. It wasn't wrong. Getting caught was just bad luck. So the only thing they had to do would be better at not getting caught. That's all they had to. They didn't have to stop the bad behaviour, because the people who were telling them to stop had no authority. Well, why should I respect your authority? You have no authority. You're not a family elder or something like that, or religious. Now, if you sort of go back to say 1800s or even early 1900s Ireland, which was devoutly Catholic at the time. The priest held huge authority, and even the head of a criminal gang wouldn't dare defy the Catholic priest, and they would walk away from conflict. Anyone else, they'd kill them, but the Catholic priest, again, the priest's person was sacred. These things, of course, have been lost in Ireland now, but the idea of authority and where authority comes from, by the consent of the populace and so on, that's something that these third world people don't understand. But my main concern is that in the West, all over the West, be it Australia, Britain or elsewhere, there is no compulsory requirement for people to achieve a standard of Western acclimatization before they come to the West. And if they insisted on competent English, they insisted on certain behavioural rules and so on. Then, as in how to behave around other people and how to be, you don't go hanging around about girls' high schools calling out for sexual favours, these sorts of things. If a police officer tells you to move on, you do it, and they are a legitimate source of authority in our societies, and so on, to acclimatise them to that. And if they're not willing to accept it or agree to it, don't let them come. And the problem with the majority of migrants that we have in the West now, they don't actually recognise Western authority or Western systems and procedures. They're just here for the free stuff. And they believe that the sources of social authority and cultural authority that they're used to in the countries they come from, they are the only sources and only ever will be the only sources of authority. And they have no interest in accepting the norms and the standards and the behaviours of the West that they're so desperate to come to. But again, they only want the free stuff. They don't want anything else. You've been with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.